obviously with all that's happening with the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, a big part of that is around almost economic empowerment of people of color and minority communities. What has been your kind of experience within that corporate setting, either it's like wanting to change things within, and also just with starting your own ventures, right? Because we all know that less than 1% of VC funding actually goes to people of color. So like, how have you kind of navigated those spaces?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the corporate one is just as interesting as the startup world, really. I think, especially when you go to some large corporates and you are perhaps one of a few, it does make you feel maybe a bit isolated and a bit sort of like, oh, like maybe I'm the only one. And I think it does a few things. So first off, I think it adds a lot of pressure. So you're thinking, well, I'm kind of the flag bearer now for everyone else to come. And that especially gets heightened when you're looking at entrepreneurship projects or intrapreneurship projects, right? Because there are also minority things that happen within a company. So when you put yourself on the line and hold your hand up, the pressure of failing or letting everybody else down is actually quite real. So I definitely think that's quite interesting from that standpoint. And it's probably heightened by, I think, there's definitely a real drive for people of color to gravitate towards entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship projects. And I think that's because they perhaps don't feel they belong as much within the corporate structure. So you look at a structure that's built for a purpose and you see people working towards that purpose, but nobody looks like you. And you kind of look around and think, well, maybe I should just leave and go and make my own purpose then. Or how can I figure out a way to mold a purpose within the company? So I think those two things come hand in hand. One, you actually don't feel like perhaps maybe that mission of the company is aligned to your mission because there's no one that represents you or speaks on your own behalf. And at the same time, you want to be drawn towards these entrepreneurship projects that have a lot of pressure and visibility on them. So yeah, there's definitely a subtle difference that probably only people of color will really notice that's really going on within a company. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing because at the same time, there are massive benefits of taking on that project and doing well, right? So yeah, but there's like everything, there's pros and cons.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a lot of a reason why there are a lot of, at least in the UK, Black entrepreneurs doing their own thing is because the systems, the structures of corporates are just not really. So the rationale of an entrepreneur, right, is that, okay, I'll rise up within the company to a position of responsibility where I can be able to lobby the board to adopt my project. But the problem is it's not built for that. Like for Black people, career progression is one of the hardest things, let alone worrying about pay and just a bunch of other key issues, which means that you compare that with the opportunity of working on, even though you in the existing world, like in society, you will still face those problems outside. At least you'd be working on for yourself, and you'd have investors, you'd have consumers, but fundamentally you'd be working on something you're very passionate about, which is just very empowering if there's that social mission aligned with inbuilt almost into your business model.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really cool.
So homeless charity, we basically try and tackle homelessness through the use of technology. And we have usually a few different means of doing that. So basically, one of our main products is the Connected Homeless app, where basically if you see somebody with a pink wristband, and they'll have an ID number etched into that wristband. And what that allows you to do is go to your donor app and say, hey, what's your ID number? Maybe it's 1TT, they say 1TT, you enter £2, send it, and it goes straight through to their digital wallet. So we equip everyone with the technology to receive that at a very low cost. And what that allows them to do is go to a shop and redeem and spend that money as it was real money without the difficulties of wondering whether it's going to go on drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, like a lot of people presume that people use that money for. And it gives them full flexibility and remains that dignity that actually they can spend it on whatever they want, actually, as long as it's within that shop and within the age of 18 as well. So as long as it's in any supervision, so things like razors, alcohol, etc., they can just get on and use their life. But it's much wider than that. So it's using technology to understand how homeless people can help fill out grants when they're talking to the council about the situation and whether they're actually qualifying for homeless housing. It's technology to help people who have spare goods like phones, donate those and help redistribute them within the homeless network. It's technology to understand data better on the homeless situation and what works and what doesn't work, so we can expedite people moving through the system. It's understanding what things go in certain orders for certain people. So whether if you have a mental health problem, is that better than going straight into employment? Like which stages work best where? So really we're trying to build a digital charity basically that can have all this technology and all these platforms, and we just give that to homeless charities where they can run and use that with the people that they engage with daily to be more effective, to be more tech-led, to be more focused. And any improvements and increments that we can deliver go out to much a wider base internationally.
That's really cool. And it's really interesting though, because you obviously have like a corporate background, but how do you think you've been able to transition from that? So maybe it's Google or wherever you've worked, and kind of go from that to kind of making your passion your day job, right? Whether that's with QTA or whether that's with Connected Homeless. It's just really interesting how you made that transition.
So I think my career set me up for these type of issues. So prior to Google, I led an area called Business Commerce for O2. So taught me a lot about people, number one, but also the power of technology as a connector. And this is a really interesting thing. So the whole idea started when we figured out that around 75% of homeless people had a phone. And you initially go, whoa, that's so high. But actually think about it, and you're going from a position of uncertainty, of absolute certainty into uncertainty. You leave behind everything else. You leave behind loads of clothing, you leave behind your PS4, and the one thing you take is your phone as a connector. And the one thing that I knew is how powerful a phone is to connect people. So really that laid the groundwork in a lot of ways. And then I went to Google and did a lot in tech development, tech partnerships, which really taught me a lot about project management, about running things, about launching, scaling different things. So it all kind of came together when it was ready for me to do my own thing. So yeah, it's been an interesting take. And it's also really informed the way that I look at social problems. So the whole genesis of this idea was, what if corporates could start and solve social issues rather than the government?
Yeah.
We have so many different resources that we can all pull together with. We have so many different skills. We have a totally different way of thinking. How do we bridge that gap? And really what we're trying to do is marry the best of the both worlds. So the corporate world is very innovative, but it's also very competitive. And we don't want that competitiveness to creep into the charitable world. But at the same time, the charitable world isn't as technologically advanced. And also it's very reliant on donations as its sort of main driver for movement. So it's like, how do we actually merge some different ideas, some innovations to try and build something that has the best of both?
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, like the best of both. And I think you find this a lot with kind of people who are very initiative driven and want to be that agent of change within an existing organization. And it's always that nexus between, on the one hand, the inbuilt kind of conservatism of that organization, which is naturally has a lot of scale, has a lot of resources, has a lot of infrastructure, but is naturally risk averse, which has some of its benefits as well as like its detractions. But on the other hand, trying to kind of harness the best of that world, but also with the agility and the speed and the fearlessness, right, of taking all those digital ideas and solutions and taking that out of the organization to spin off into your own ventures. So like the key question really is like, do you think that entrepreneurs can do that within their organizations, right? Whether they can almost recognize a problem that people face, and try to make that organization adopt their solution as a key barrier? Or do you think the solution is just to step out of that organization if you're really passionate about it and just build that yourself?
Yeah. I think it completely depends on what you're building.
Yeah.
So if you're building something that's incredibly aligned to the core values and mission of that business, they're going to bite your hand off, right? Because it's typically going to be a value add. It makes sense. It's almost like, why haven't we done this already? Let's get on with it. If it's something that you're passionate about that doesn't quite fit in so much, or if it does, but it's a very small part of what the company is trying to do, there might be a bit more friction there. But actually, I always say that basically that balance that I'm trying to create is basically entrepreneurship. Like, how do you take the agility of a startup and the organizational processes of a large company and merge the two together? And that's typically what you get in entrepreneurship, providing you have the right backing and you've got the right support to make the vision a reality.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think kind of stepping back from like, okay, how do you practically do this? Like I was actually wanting to dig a bit deeper into kind of how important it is to be self-reflective about, you know, what your strengths are, like how you operate, and kind of your leadership style. Because with entrepreneurship and also being an entrepreneur, it can often be quite lonely. So like, first of all, what do you think your leadership style is, and what are kind of your key traits that you think helped you to go from that idea, and many people have great ideas, but actually to practically implement them and to go to execution of the project?
Yeah, no, you're right. You need a lot of self-reflection, and you need a lot of humility too.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I think that came quite easy for me, because one of the first things I realized is I'm not that smart. And that's fine. I'm more than happy with that. I'm very comfortable with that fact. But what I can do is connect people and bring people together and drive a mission and convey the value of pursuing that mission, which ultimately doesn't matter, because I can bring the people in that I don't have within my own skill set. And I always tell this to people. So when I'm doing any sort of marketing or strategy with people and they're saying, should I do Google? Should I do Pinterest? Should I do Instagram? Should I do email? And I'm thinking, look, you can do all those things, I'm sure, but you're only going to ever do them at a 20% level. And that's kind of the way I look at a lot of different challenges that I face in business. I can do them, but at 20, 30% level. It's much better for me to lean on somebody who can do that at 100% and bite the prize and have things that are done properly, that are executed well, that are well thought out. And I think that's really one of the earliest things. And even if you are that smart, don't be smart, because, you know, lean on people, because it's very easy when you're not smart, because it's like, I've got no other choice. But usually you see some very intelligent people trying to bite off way too much and trying to solve every single problem. And then you ask them, where's the project in 2-3 months' time? And they're burnt out and they're working on all these different ideas all on their own. And you're thinking, oh, like I would have just, you know, gone and messaged these 3 people and had it done in a week. Yeah. So sometimes that awareness of your own strengths can really be a real kicker. And what I always tell people, just in general and overall life advice, is spend more time focusing and developing your strengths than mitigating your weaknesses. Yeah, of course, everyone can grow their weaknesses, and it's very valuable when you have the time and opportunity to do so. But when you're trying to pursue something that's very difficult and very challenging, understanding that I'm just going to, if I'm great at communicating a vision or maybe raising funding, I'm just going to go gung for ho for that. And I'm going to bring the other people in that can do the technology and do the organization work and the operational efficiencies, etc.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, that's actually really key. Even looking back at my own entrepreneurial kind of journey, it's recognizing really what your skills are. Soft skills, it doesn't necessarily need to be technical as well, and almost honing in on that. But the way you mitigate weaknesses is by hiring very, very driven, smart people who are very good at other things, to just help you in that journey. And you almost already answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The next question I had, which was kind of about how you're able to juggle like those two different roles, because I think that's one of the huge barriers to people who, you know, are working at their day job, and they say, and they're very socially conscious, and they're like, okay, but how is what I'm doing having an impact on where I want the world to be? Almost squaring that circle of time, like, or lack thereof. Where do you how do you kind of bridge that gap, and how do you manage your time to make sure you're working smart as well as working hard?
Well, that's definitely the thing, right? It's understand how you can work smart rather than working hard. Ultimately, the goal is to do both, right? Yeah. You get a lot of people that work incredibly hard and not very smart. You get some people that do both a little bit, you know, averagely. And then you get some people that work hardly at all, but very smart. And I would take that if I didn't take the final option, which is to work hard and work smart at the same time. But really, it comes down to what you said also, in terms of making sure that people that you bring onto something are better at it than you are. And that is also in the self-reflection and the humility to basically say, you are the person for this, I'm bringing you in to do that. I think Steve Jobs had a great quote when he said, we hire smart people so they can tell us what to do, not the other way around. And it's definitely about that. So yeah, I spend most of my time making sure that systems are right, making sure that the right people are in the right seats, making sure that everything can move and flow, so I can spend my time on higher, different, more sort of visionary things. Half of them don't come off, and half of them, you know, a complete waste of time, but at least I've afforded myself that time to shoot for some of the bigger things.
Sure. So just lastly, Sal, I just wanted to ask, what are your kind of 3 key pieces of advice for someone who wants to start an initiative, recognizes a key maybe deficiency within their existing jobs, and wants to solve that key issue? And also, are there like any books or resources that you would recommend people look at, whether that's to do with more of the self-reflective piece, right, about knowing yourself and knowing what your strengths are, or just with entrepreneurship or doing things, right? That would be really good. Yeah.
Cool. 3 things. I'd say definitely the first would be do your research. I think a lot of people I see, they'll start something and it will just, you know, it's some sort of game-changing idea. Then they actually realize along the path that maybe the problem isn't what they thought it was, or the solutions that they've come out with maybe don't work that well, or somebody's already doing it anyway. But in spite of that, they'll just push on anyway, out of pure sort of desperation to get this thing that was in their head out of their head. And actually, if you just do your research, keep calm, you can really zero in on a real problem with real solutions and opportunities there. Maybe the second is really understand what the other world is, right? There are a lot of benefits of being at a company, and it definitely depends on what type of person you are. And I'm not saying that being outside of a company is not also a dream, but it can always look like that type of the grass is greener on the other side type of thing, right? Like everyone's, oh, I want to run a charity. Like, there are a lot of things wrong with charities. Like, let's get that clear. You only need to speak to somebody who's been working in them for 5 minutes before they start going, yeah, it's not what I thought it was going to be. And it's not that they are intrinsically bad. It's just there are good things about corporates and bad things about corporates, good things about charities and social endeavors, and good and bad things about them. So really understand what the other world looks like, and if it will answer the questions that maybe you're asking yourself. And I'd probably say, this is probably the best piece of advice maybe you can give to anybody, it's just be brave. Like, go out there. If you feel like it's going to have an impact, tap people up, ask for their time, see if the idea is any good. If there's a grant funding, don't write yourself off before you've just even done the application. Look at it and say, look, like I'm going to put my hat in the ring. Maybe I get it, maybe I don't, but I'm going to be brave. And even if I get kicked in the face, I'm going to go back again. I'm going to go back again. I'm going to go back again. And I think so many people look at entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship as this golden bullet. They read all these books and they've seen this person started a company 2 years later, living an amazing life and, you know, going around the world telling everyone the story about it. And it's rarely that. And you should really understand that it takes a lot of guts. And by definition, like your entrepreneur's number one job is to kind of fail and fail quickly and keep iterating and not be bothered by it. And that bravery will be the number one thing to get most people through.